Welcome back, everyone. For today's video, we are back with our fourth and final tournament on the road to the Canadas. Now, after my recent tournament that I played in Canada in Prince Edward Island, I have 5 games remaining in order to qualify for the next candidates tournament, which will be part of the FIDE World Championship cycle. Now, with only 5 games left and obviously 2 months left in the year, I was looking at a couple of tournaments. I had my eye on one specific tournament that I wanted to play this weekend. And that tournament, of course, is the first annual Dulles Open. Of course, it is here in the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., and we're playing very close to Dulles Airport, which is a major international hub. So we're back. I'm playing in the first annual Dulles Open. It's a 5-round tournament. Once I complete these 5 games, I will qualify officially for the FIDE Candidates tournament. So let's jump right into the action. Now, the first round, I'm playing with white pieces against Daka Tanush. He is a local kid, relatively young. And one thing that I've learned over the last couple of years is when you're playing kids who are very young, they're very, very sharp tactically, and you want to play slow, boring positional chess, or as I like to call it, old man chess. So I have the white pieces, and I start out by playing knight to f3. We get knight f6, g3, and now we get the move g6. I play bishop g2, bishop g7, castles, d4, and now we get the move d6. Now at this point, we're in a fianchetto King's Indian, where both sides have put their bishops on the diagonals here, and now I play the move c4. Black, of course, could also play the move d5, and this is what would be known as the Grunfeld defense instead. So we get d6. I play c4, knight bd7, and this is actually an interesting oddity that I want to point out. Now, in these tournaments that I've played against slightly lower rated players, one thing that's surprising is every time that I've played this fianchetto King's Indian, my opponents have always played the system with knight bd7. In both the games that I played in Louisiana, which kicked off this Road to the Candidates series, both my opponent Villamil from Colombia, and I forget the other guy's name, the master level player that I played later in the tournament, they both played this move knight bd7. So I go knight c3, we get e5, e4, and now we get the move a5. Now it's worth pointing out that in the aforementioned tournament in Louisiana, when I became the state champion, Villamil from Colombia played this move e takes d4, and after takes, rook e8, h3, knight c5, rook e1, and a5, we reached a position that was very, very similar to my game today. Now the big difference between the position in the Villamil game is that I ended up playing this move b3 here, trying to put my bishop potentially on this b2 diagonal. Now the reason I mention this is when we get back to the game that I played tonight here, we got the move a5 played by Daka, I played h3, takes, we got the move rook e8, and now I had time to play the move bishop to e3. This, of course, is a difference that without black putting the immediate pressure on the pawn with the knights and the rook, I'm able to set up this bishop on this e3 square instead, because now when black plays knight c5, I have time to play queen c2, protecting this pawn on e4. We get the move bishop to d7, and now I play the move rook to e1. Now, one thing that I mentioned to my young opponent after the game is that I think that if you're a much lower rated player and you're playing the King's Indian and you're playing against this fianchetto variation, it's very hard to play this system as black, because white always has a lot more space in this position. Black's pieces are very cramped. You have all these pieces that are on the first 2 rows here. You do have the knights on c5 and f6, but they aren't super active, and white has very easy play like rook d1 and f4. And if you're playing a much stronger player, I think it's very hard to play these systems where you're simply very cramped and lacking in space. So we get this position after bishop e7, rook e1, we get c6, and now I play the move rook a d1. Here we get queen c7, and now I play the move pawn to f4. Now at this point in the game, I was already feeling very comfortable with the situation here, because I've got these nice pawns, I can put the bishop on f2, I've got these diagonals, I have these, or I can't draw arrows apparently, what am I doing? I have this great diagonal, I have the 2 rooks in the center of the board, and so white simply has a lot more space, and it's very hard to play. So we get the move rook d8. Now I go bishop to f2. This move is a prophylactic move. It maybe isn't necessary, but now with the bishop on f2, the bishop and the knight, the rook, and the queen all guard this. And additionally, I can look to maybe play e5 with the rook supporting this thrust. So we get the move bishop c8. Now I play the move a3 here, trying to go b4 and kick this knight out of the c5 square. We get the move rook to e7, and now I play the move b4. Now, one thing I want to point out here that you'll notice that my young opponent was using a lot of time, and this is a clear byproduct of his position being so cramped with no real counterplay. I have these pawns on e4 and c4. They stop black from playing either d5 or b5 here, so all these pieces just stuck on the first two ranks. It's just very, very hard to play, and on top of that, when you're lacking in space, usually you have to be extremely patient and just try to keep the game going without having a concrete plan. And for someone who's lower rated, it's very, very hard to sit on a position and not try to play for something active. So we got rook e7. This move played after a 30-minute think. I think my young opponent was simply struggling here to come up with a plan, and now I played the move b4 after a 13-minute think. Now, in this position, I strongly suspected that this move knight to b5 was in fact winning in this position, but there are two things on my mind. First of all, I'm playing someone much lower rated. So because I'm playing someone much lower rated, I know that it's not a situation where I want to go for something very tactical unless I'm 100% sure if it's winning. Now, if I wanted to spend 20 or 30 minutes and I were playing someone like a Fabiano Caruana, I almost certainly would spend a huge amount of time trying to calculate whether this line works. But ultimately, after spending about 12 minutes, I decided, why bother? I don't need to go for something tactical, because if I just keep squeezing, taking more space in the center of the board, eventually good things are going to happen. Now, knight b5 would have been winning in the game, because after takes and takes here, black goes queen c6. There's the move e5. I actually was afraid of this move bishop to f5, and I wasn't 100% sure what was going on. I thought that sacking the queen on f5 was winning, but I just didn't calculate this whole long line, and I basically thought, why bother? Now, this, of course, is one of the issues with playing people significantly weaker, because I know the margins and what I can do and what I can't do, and so therefore, I simply decided not to go for this. Now, if black were to play queen b6 or b4 would simply be winning due to the pin on this diagonal. After takes, the knight is under pressure, the pawn, the rook, everything is collapsing here, and white should win the game. But I decided to play the move b4 instead. We get takes, knight e6, and now I play the move knight f3. Now you'll notice here that I have so much space with these pawns on the fourth rank. Black still has no pawn break. Now the pieces are confined to these three ranks, and black, really lacking in space here, is simply suffering mightily. On top of that, I have a nearly 1 hour edge on the clock to boot, so I know that all roads are going to lead to the White House. So we get the move knight to f8 here. After the move knight to f8 is played, I now go for this move queen d3. This move is fine. It's maybe not necessary. I could have played this move c5, but when I was thinking about this position, I was thinking about themes. And one of the very important things that I learned probably over a decade ago now is that when you're in a situation where you have so much more space or all these pieces are really getting pushed back, one thing you're looking to do here is to not trade pawns. You're really trying to avoid big trades or liquidations, because when your opponent doesn't have space for the pieces, it's like you have too few squares, not enough space. It's almost like a traffic jam. You want to clear off the board, get rid of some pieces, and then your spaces will have more activity. So that's why I didn't go c5 here, even though it's a very strong computer line, because after pawn takes, I thought after takes, for example, and bishop c5, and the move rook to d7, maybe black gets knight e6. Now you kind of have a double stack here. I wasn't 100% sure if there was a concrete way to prove the advantage. So if I can't prove the advantage, why do I want to trade? So that's why I decided instead to play queen d3. We get rook d7, and now I play the move knight to a4, trying to go for this b6 square with either the knight or the bishop. Now here we get the move c5. This is the move after which I think there's really no road back. But even if my opponent were to play rook e8 here, it's still very, very miserable. Something like knight b6, rook d7, and knight h4, for example, or even knight d2. This is just a miserable, miserable position. This pawn is weak. The bishop is under attack. Black just really is so cramped here that it's just very, very hard to play the position. On top of that, of course, my opponent is very low on time. So we get c5 played after a 4-minute think. One thing I realized that I did not mention in this recap so far is the time control. Now, the time control is very unusual. We're playing with 1 hour and 50 minutes with a 10-second increment for move number 1. Now, this is very unusual. Usually, you play with a 30-second increment, but with this time control, only 10-second increment, I know that if I get my opponents low on time, they are just not going to be able to find good moves without the real benefit of 30 seconds per move. So after c5, I go knight c3 back, trying to go to either b5 or d5 here. Notice here that this pawn on c6 covers both these squares for the knight. The knight can't jump here, but once I provoke the pawn push, now the knight has the free squares. We get this move b6. Black here is trying to go for the double fianchetto with bishop b7, and now I play the move rook c1. We got bishop b7, knight d2, queen b8 here, and now I play the move rook b1. Now, these last couple of moves, I'm simply trying to keep pressure on the clock without making a committal decision here. What I'm doing is I'm trying to really put the heat on, and when my opponent gets to 10 seconds or less, then I'll go for all the action. So here we get queen c7, I take, and now we get the move d takes c5. B takes c5 is probably okay here. My opponent with such little time on the clock was simply able to move instantly. This would have been a better try, but after a move like rook b3 and rook to b1, going for the classic double stack on the file and still having both these squares available for the knight, black's position is just miserable, and white should win quite convincingly. So we get this move d takes c5 instead here, and of course in this position I now have to play the move knight to d5. Now, when I go knight to d5, we get the trade, and here we get the move rook to a8. Now, I did spend a bit of time here, about 2 minutes before deciding how to capture, because I thought about taking with the e-pawn here, with the idea of going queen b3 to pressure this pawn on b6 with the queen and the rook. But ultimately, I thought after pawn takes, if my opponent does not play f5 here, I'm going to win 100% of the time. And even if black plays f5, trying to break up this pawn chain in the center of the board, after queen to b3, black must go king h8. If black were to take the pawn, it's the uh-oh spaghetti-o moment as I have b6 here, checking the king and attacking the queen. This, of course, is what is known as a classic fossil in modern-day chess lingo. If black plays c4, after takes, I take the rook, and after takes, and knight takes pawn, or knight takes b3, even cleaner, I simply have one extra rook in the position, and the material will play. So we get the move rook to a8. Actually, sorry, I realized my mind is going here. After f5, queen b3, black has to go king h8 to dodge the d6 threat. And now after the move knight to c4, pawn takes d6 here, takes, and bishop takes e4. Black has a bishop, or a knight, I should say, and a pawn for the rook. But in this position, with the passive knight on f8, the active rook, double stack on the e file here, black is completely lost. So we get rook to a8 instead, and now after I play knight c4, here we get bishop a6, I go e5, and here I'm going to create the classic connect 4 in the center of the board, and the position is just terrible for black. It's already positionally lost here. Black has no hope, which is why black had to try to go f5 before I'm able to start marching the pawns up the board here, because now after takes, we get rook b8, I go h4 here. This is the move simply designed to stop black from freeing this pony on f8. You can tell that this pony here is very, very sad. There are no squares available. One way to create counterplay would be go g5 and try to get the knight to g6 to hit the pawn on e5. So I go h4, stopping this move, because if black plays g5, I just take, and now my pawns are completely intact here. Even knight g6 allows me to play d6, creating this classic mix of the pawns, and I would win the game. So we get h5. Now I play rook to a1. We get b5 here. This move loses on the spot, but let's say my opponent weren't going to hang the pawn with b5, queen c5. After a move like rook d8, there are many ways to win, but one of the cleanest is to go rook to a6, and simply play something like queen to b5, followed by rook to a1 and rook a7. Maybe d6 is in play, and black is just completely lost. So we get b5. I take, we get b4, rook b1, b3, and now I play this move rook to a3. After I play rook to a3, we get b2, bishop d4, and now we get the move rook d8. If we were to get the move rook to b7, I simply go rook to a2, and after rook b4, I take. If black takes the bishop, you lose this rook. And if black trades down, this position is simply winning here, because I have 2 extra pawns in the center. I'm just going to run the king all the way up, win the knight, or promote the pawn in the long run. So we get rook d8, I take the pawn, we get the trade, and now after knight d7, I simply go bishop to d4, dominating the horse. This horse has no squares available in the position. We get bishop f8, and now I play the move d6, which also puts the bishop in complete jail as well. Bishop can't ever take the pawn. Bishop goes here, doesn't matter. I can always take. If the bishop goes here, I still can wait. Takes. So this bishop is basically walled in by all the pawns here. So the bishop is dead. The knight is also dominated here. The 2 Bs that I have in this position are simply power overwhelming. So we get bishop g7. I go bishop to d5 here, creating what we call the classic double wooden shield. The 2 bishops are perfectly placed here on the diagonals in the middle of the board. This position is just a complete dream. So now we get king f8. I play the move rook to a7, bishop h8, and now one last little touch with king g2. Now there's no need to go king g2, but I play this move so that if black ever, for example, were to sack a rook, after takes bishop, this will never be a check, as my king is not on g1. So we get bishop g7, I go bishop c6, knight b8, and now I play the move bishop b5, permanently locking this knight on the square. Knight now is completely dominated by the bishop. There are no squares available here. We got the move king g8, I go rook b7, king f8, and now I decide to play this move e6. Now I could have gone bishop a7 for the classic themes to win the pony, as the knight is stuck here. You go to any of these squares, you lose the knight. You lose the knight. If you move the king, I just take the knight and win the game. But I decided at this point I didn't really want to keep the game going super long. So that's why in this position, I decided instead to play the move e6 here, pushing the p, trying to push the pawns through to win the game. Here we get pawn takes pawn. If we were to get bishop takes bishop, I have e7 check, forking the king and the rook. King can't come over because, of course, the bishop covers the square. And then I promote to a queen, and I win the game in a few moves. So we get pawn takes pawn, but now I can take the bishop. The rook guards the bishop. We get king g8, bishop back to e5 here, protecting the pawn. We get king f8, and now I play the move d7, winning this knight on b8. We get knight takes pawn. I take, king g8 takes, king f8, check, king e8, and I'm able to play the move bishop to f7, creating the checkmate with the rook and the two bishops. So, a very, very clean first game, a long first game. My opponent did use a lot of time. I had some moments where I did think as well, but overall the result was never in doubt. Now, this tournament actually is a bit stronger than it looked like originally when I registered. I realized I didn't mention this at the start of the recap, but a Grand Master by the name of Paved Balakrishnan, who does live here locally in Virginia, registered in the tournament. There are also 2 international masters who registered as well. So there will be some stiff competition potentially in this event, but we have now taken care of 1 game in the tournament. There are 4 games remaining, but more importantly, beyond this tournament, these are the last 4 games that I have to play in order to qualify for the FIDE Candidates Tournament early next year. So we're off to a good start here in Washington, D.C. in the first annual Dulles Open with a win. Tomorrow there will be 2 games on Sunday as well. All's well that ends well at the start here. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this recap from the first round of the Dulles Open. If you are not already subscribed to the channel, make sure that you smash that subscribe button below, and we'll be back with a recap tomorrow after I play games 2 and 3 in this tournament. See you guys soon. Have a great rest of your evening, and auf Wiedersehen. See you guys. Bye.